if your YouTube or Instagram or social media algorithm is starting to point you in a certain direction, and that certain direction is entrepreneurship, self-employment, then you have probably been recommended a certain set of books. Among them, Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill, The Richest Man in Babylon by George S. Clason, or Rich Dad Poor Dad by Robert Kiyosaki. And among them, The 4-Hour Workweek. Is this book worth your time to read? For me, frankly, I could not finish this book, and I kind of hated it. However, with the other books of this same category, I found I got tremendous value. I really enjoyed them, and I thought they were well worth it. But I quit this about 3/4 of the way through. It definitely was interesting, but there are some key factors to this book that totally killed it for me. And a few of the other people that gave up on this book gave up at about the same part that I did, which I thought was pretty significant and interesting. But they also disliked it for the same reasons I did. But another thing you should note is I'm not rich. I don't live this lifestyle, and I haven't achieved any sort of the kind of success that this sort of reading material might bring. So you can choose whether or not to listen to me, and frankly, I'm not going to give you any advice. I'm not going to say don't read this book. What I will say is, in my opinion, this should be a little lower on your reading list, especially compared to the titles that I mentioned earlier in the book. Alright, so it starts off in pretty much the way that you would expect it to start. He just goes into the big mindset shift that pretty much everyone talks about. This was probably ahead of its time, is just the change of your mindset. Really, anything is possible. The way that 99% of people do everything is wrong, or doesn't lead to any kind of significant success, and so therefore you have to change your mind about life, essentially. And given how constant that information is, 100% true. But then it gets a little cultish. Of course, this is a common tactic among YouTubers, Twitch streamers, bloggers, anyone who has any kind of online presence or any kind of following, even Oprah for God's sakes, but the name of the game is marketing. And so when you create little slogans or little iterums that come up all the time, things like the 2-minute rule and the 33% rule and the 40% rule and all of these different things that are sort of just like catchphrases that get mentioned all the time and end up being a Twitter hashtag and just draws a bunch of attention to that specific piece of content. This book is filled with that. So first of all, he refers to entrepreneurial ventures or businesses as a muse. I'm gonna be honest, it's just like plain pretentious and a little annoying. I feel like most down-to-earth human beings might get a little gross, dude. Aside from that, there's also NR, which stands for New Rich, which is, it's right there. In short, just means a person who gets money by getting paid through the internet and lives a very independent lifestyle that isn't dictated by a workplace, more or less. Just a person whose business is liberated by a laptop. The next one is, of course, he comes up with his own system, DEAL, DEAL, and it stands for Definition, Elimination, Automation, and Liberation. I mean, frankly, reading this whole book is like reading a blog, a really long blog post. And there's another touchy subject that a lot of people are going to be on the fence about. I myself am on the fence about, and it's going to strike a different chord for everybody, but it is also an important opportunity that people need to pay attention to. So with the internet, and this being now a more worldly economy, you can take advantage of opportunities you might not have gotten in the past. The internet hands a huge power to the average person, and this book essentially talks about taking advantage of that. But another thing is the arbitrage between everything, really, which I think is really important. For example, one of the really cool things that he dropped out in this book, and there are plenty of those little cool things here and there. He talked about someone who used their vacation to take advantage of the economy of Thailand and use that to get some dental work done while they were on vacation for significantly less. And, he mentioned, of course, yeah, it sounds sketchy, whatever. He talks about, do your research, you have to find a quality practice, etc., blah, blah, blah. But that's the kind of thing that's important to pay attention to. However, this is where it gets touchy, because this is the topic of outsourcing. Now, in one part, he talks in great detail about virtual assistants, which is a cool thing, and essentially talks about paying people really small amounts to do things that they can do from like an office. Which, don't get me wrong, very cool idea, but I mean, it was in the same chapter, but at one point he talks about taking advantage of all kinds of things, and so he found apparently an Indian chef to come to his home and cook a meal for him for $5 an hour. What? What? What kind of self-respecting chef would allow himself to get paid $5 an hour to come to your house, cook you a delicious, authentic meal? I don't get that. And also, why would you be so proud of it? But why would you be okay with that? If someone came to my apartment, or came to my house, or came to me and cooked me a delicious meal, I would at least pay him minimum wage, which, by the way, minimum wage when this book was written is like $7.25 an hour. So that's, I mean, you know what, like, climbing your way to the top and saving money, you know, like, you do you, man. As someone in the Amazon comments mentioned on this book at times screams morally bankrupt. And I have to agree with that. I am a huge believer in ethics in business. The line is thin, man. Now, that being said, the topic of outsourcing in general is touchy, because there are business owners and entrepreneurs who want to bring work to America or keep it in America. Bottom line is, some parts of this book just aren't for everyone. Now, the other thing is, and this was one of the big killers for me, was there's just a lot of fluff. And it's not completely, there's just a lot of stuff that doesn't have to be in the book. Plain and simple. Like, the big one for me was in the beginning, and this is how it dwindles off by 3/4 of the book. It starts off very ideological. Talks about the mindset shift and all this kind of thing, and he goes into explaining even in the beginning of each part very well, but quickly he gets into very excruciating details about very specific examples of things, and it takes up a lot of the book, and some of it just isn't relevant to some people's lives. So, for example, I have a section, just to give you an idea. If you're a very detail-oriented person, this is good. I am simply not, and it was pretty painful for me to get through some of this. This is like an example of a business model. It's all great, and it's there for you to fill in the details. It's genuinely helpful. If we're selling a 10,000 abominable snowman suit with an 80% profit margin, we obviously need a much lower conversion rate than someone who is selling a $50 DVD with a 70% profit margin. For sophisticated tools and free spreadsheets to do all that sort of calculations for you, visit the reader-only resources at www.4hourblog.com. And it digresses later. The traffic wasn't enough to make the test stand up to the statistical scrutiny, but she spent about $200 on PPC and got 14 signups for a free 10-tip report. If she assumes 60% would purchase, that means 8.4 people times $75 profit per DVD equals $630 in hypothetical total profit. This is also not taking account into the potential lifetime value of each customer. Again, very specific. Man, I gotta tell you, it goes on for pages like that. He refers you back to his blog about 37 million times. And he's also constantly dropping in links, which is cool, but it's a book. I can't click on the link and it doesn't take me there. I can go to my computer and type it in, that's fine. But here's the other thing to consider. This book was written in what? This book was written in 2007. Now, I did check, I mean, a lot of these are still around. But literally, he talks about DVDs in this example. 2019, are you buying a DVD? Because if you are, stop it. There's just a lot of examples like that, and in my opinion, it's excessive and it's a little boring. At one point in the book, he flat out tells you the business models are not what he does. He claims that he is not an entrepreneur, he is not any of this. He is simply a writer, and that's how he makes his money. do you want to take entrepreneurial advice from someone who claims they're just a writer? I mean, he did run a business, it was successful. He is, no doubt, very successful and wealthy. It's just gross. And I found a little bit of that in Rich Dad Poor Dad. He even gives you an example of how he's talking to another writer. This writer was frustrated with how well she does, and he then tells her that he can teach her how to become a best-selling author. And she says, "How can you, a businessman, teach me how to be a best-selling author?" And he says, "Ha ha, I said best-selling author, not best author." There's going to be some people who are reading this book who want to be the best author, not the best-selling author. All of this is just sort of down and dirty tactics to get things done. It hits a nerve for me in a lot of this book. I have to be honest. And so another thing is the writing style. He's definitely very intelligent, witty, and funny. There's plenty of things in this book that'll make you happy and excited and laugh. And again, he's a very intelligent guy, but he's kind of like that really annoying little kid that knows too much about dinosaurs. And after a while, you're just like, okay, I get it. I don't care. I don't actually care. I got the expanded and updated version. I mean, look at this. I mean, this is quite literally set up like a blog, right? Got subheadings everywhere. I literally have links here. I mean, every part of this has a link, and and then footnotes on the bottom. I mean, the book is cluttered. But this book really strikes me as almost like a reference packet. A really fat reference packet. And it's cool. Like, again, people who are very detail oriented will find this useful, surely. But I found it annoying. Alright, so now I do have good things to say about this book. So, first of all, the two big concepts of this book, which are essentially all this book is saying, is number one, always be looking for ways to improve, everything you do. So life is really about time management, especially, if you have a lot of things you want to do, then it's about time management. Even the title, 4-Hour Work Week, which, by the way, I don't believe Timothy Ferris actually works 4 hours a week, just says, you can be spending a lot less time on making money. And this is great. I love it. 100% true. Now, he begins by talking about the Pareto principle, or the 80-20 rule. Now, out of all the little entrepreneurial rules, I have to admit this is probably about the only one worth hearing. And it is literally scientifically proven, and it occurs everywhere. The Bible even talks about it. And it's something that occurs in nature. Essentially, the 80-20 rule is 80% of outcomes come from 20% of effort. So let's say you are a salesperson. 80% of the money you make is going to come from 20% of your clients. Taking advantage of that rule is simply shifting your focus to those 20% of the people that are getting the most done. Like 80% of your productivity in a day comes from 20% of the things you do. I have to be honest, if you found a video or an article or anything that just talks a little bit in depth about the 80-20 rule, then you will be better off than reading this book. Now, the other thing is constantly improving your business. For example, one of the things he talks about is how he spent like all of his time answering frequently asked questions or customer concerns. So the two things he did was an effective frequently asked questions page, as well as he told his customer service team their concern could be fixed for under $100, just do it, leave him out of it completely. And this freed up a ton of his time, which is cool, 100% true, great. The only thing is, he did not come up with, now this is not original to him. A lot of the information any author gives out is recycled. Not everything is profound. This will shift your focus to those kinds of things. Is efficiency. How can this get done better? How can this be done without me being involved at all, if possible? And that's really cool. Look, if you found this book absolutely riveting and incredibly helpful and it changed your life, that is great. That's awesome. I'm glad. It just didn't do the same for me, and I know there's a lot of people out there that it won't do well for. You have to figure out what you're okay with and what you're not. A lot of it goes into talking about products. He talks about dropshipping as well, Dropshipping is a huge question mark for a lot of people. So even if you're in a service profession, like for example, I'm a mechanic, he talks about ways where I can basically make and sell DVDs. I don't know, it seems like for the service side of this thing, he pretty much just wants you to create a product about the service that you do and then share that, more or less teaching people. I mean, that's cool, and that's common. I mean, a lot of bloggers do that. A lot of places sell classes, and that's great. But the big problem is if you don't have a specific purpose or an idea of what you want to do, this book is going to be no help to you at all. When I say it assumes that you are in a 9-to-5 office job, it talks about emailing your boss, figuring out ways to work remotely, all these kinds of things. And for me, as a mechanic, I can't take my work home with me. I don't email back and forth between my bosses. A lot of it was just wasted content for me, and it'll be the same for some people. I just genuinely feel like a lot of the information that this book provides can be found elsewhere, and you could end up saving time by doing that. I ended up implementing one of his principles, which is the art of non-finishing. Not everything you start is worth your time to finish, and sometimes it just goes on to be wasted time. And so I applied this immediately and just stopped reading it. And I'm not going to tell you shouldn't read it. In fact, I would say welcome all experiences and read it and keep an open mind about it. I just would hate for people to go into this thinking it's going to solve all of their problems and get them to financial independence in a few easy steps and just take off from there. And it could, I don't know. Keep in mind, everything you read, you don't have to like. You don't even have to agree with. You don't have to be okay with. Thank you for watching. Do you agree? Do you not agree? What do you like? What do you not like about this book? Let me know in the comments below. And if you like this content and want to see more like this, then go ahead and let me know. And subscribe, of course. Yeah, I hope that brought some value to you.